Okay, hey, we're going to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. I have a really cool review for you from the brand Casio. They originally founded back in 1974, and they are Japanese in origin. Their first watch was actually known as the Casiotron, and this brand has been known for their wide range of digital watch offerings from the likes of G-Shock, Edifice, and Oceanus. Now, in terms of type of watch, of course, as mentioned, these are digital watches. Some key characteristics in design when you're looking for something that's a real leader within this segment. Of course, you're going to want to see that non-analog digital readout of timing information, and the rest is kind of up to you and how you want to make that piece special. And somehow Casio's created a very signature and nostalgic aesthetic that I think speaks to many collectors. This is part of their Casio Vintage line, and it's a newer release known as the A1100. This one in particular is the A1100D-1VT, and it's a 1970s full metal revival of a timeless retro favorite, now with a premium shine. So some of you who have been big into collecting for a long time might recognize this aesthetic from the legendary 52QS-14 Bravo. But now you get this great updated premium model, and I think it really works, especially in today's market where we're really just loving vintage and retro reissues. This goes for an MSRP of just $135, so it is very attainable for pretty much anybody who's into collecting watches. It's not the cheapest. As you guys know, there are other watches within this line you can regularly get for around $30, but it's it's not so overly premium style to where it made this balloon to a price of $400, $500, $600. So I think that's really great. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, so let's take a look at this beast. Very handsome. I mean, the full metal layout is extremely attractive, very retro, but with that nice flat brushing across the front face that ties into the flat brushing on the bracelet, man, it really just oozes just an extra level of refinement. Also, of course, the beautiful case sides that are highly polished, nothing special. We're not thinking there's any Zaratsu polishing here, but at the price point, you can't really fault it for that. And then even if you do get it, let's say at a darker angle, you need a little bit of backlight, you have it. So very nice. Now, in terms of the dimensions, I'm really liking this one. So it's about 34.8 millimeters in diameter. It is only 8.8 millimeters thick and has a lug-to-lug of just 40 millimeters. So this is going to be very wearable. Full stainless steel construction. In terms of the crystal, it is mineral glass, which is actually an upgrade for most of these because you'll typically find resin, glass there. So, I mean, which isn't really even a glass when you're looking at some of these resin cases. So I think that is very nice. In terms of the power supply, this does burn off of a CR1616 battery, so it's going to give you about 3 years of charge, which is nice. Not super long, but also not so short to where you feel like there's going to be a lot of extra upkeep. Now, I did mention the backlight does have an amber color there, as you can see. Check it out. Nothing special. It would have been cool for them to really, let's say put a sapphire in here and really get some electroluminescence, something like you would find in a G-Shock. That would be cool, but also it would be expensive. I mean, you got to think about the full metal G-Shocks come with mineral glass in the $400 range, the ones that are made out of steel. Once you start getting into titanium models, you do get a sapphire, but I mean, those are all in, above $1,500. So this is actually quite a deal in terms of the way that it's spec'd. And I mean, it's quite gorgeous. And there's honestly not a lot of crystal there for you to scratch, for you to be worried about anyway, especially at this price point. So it's not like you would want to ever worry about trying to replace this glass. You would just replace the watch itself when it gets a little bit overly worn. And at $135, I think that's pretty doable. And I think most people would be wearing this at a capacity where it's not a G-Shock, right? It's going to be more of kind of an everyday, somewhat dressy watch. I think this actually fits a really good space for something that is actually quite tailored feeling and quite stylish. just really hip, honestly, in terms of that design aesthetic. So you do have another interesting feature is you have 20 millimeter lugs. So if you do want to put this on a standard strap, you actually could, which is really cool. It still does have that flared, tapering bracelet. But if you wanted to just put this on a 20 millimeter strap, or maybe if you have a strap that has a natural step out or a flare to it, you could also do that. But I thought that was really interesting. So, I mean, you could put this thing on a NATO strap if you wanted, right? So you just open a lot of doors by having that 20 millimeter lug width. But I have to say, this bracelet is really cool. No, it's nothing special in terms of its construction, guys. Of course, it's going to be hollow links. But one thing that's very interesting here is, as you can see, let me give it a quick little wipe. You can see it actually has a tri-fold clasp, which is not super common on these watches. Typically, you're going to have something that's going to be like an adjustable kind of, it's more like a mesh securing system where you don't even remove links. You kind of just, move the clasp forward. It has a very jewelry-like aesthetic to it. I really like that they decided to go with this nice tri-fold dual push button clasp. Even though this is all stamped, of course, it does keep within the proportions of this nice thin and very, very attractive piece. Let's actually get the little watch base out of the picture. One of the reasons I had to put it on a watch base is because this bracelet doesn't fully collapse in terms of its articulation. It does have a bit of body and structure built into it. And you guys can see the profile on here is really quite attractive. It does have a bit of a bubble back, but again, when you have this on the wrist, it's not something that you're really going to notice. You can also see that you do have a couple of manual micro adjust positions there for you to get in a precise fit. And for my 7.5-inch wrist, it was pretty easy. Actually, I ended up taking out, I want to say 3 links and adding 1 link back in just to kind of help situate the clasp, which is where I like to keep it. I think a lot of people think you should center this part, but it's always the length of the folding section that you want to center. So as you can see here, although it might be a little bit more forward, which is normal to have the face that opens being a little further up underneath the 12 o'clock position of the watch, that is pretty much how you get it to fit perfectly. And some of you guys might be struggling to get a nice fit. And I tell you what, as much as things like micro adjust and how many links or half links you have available to you matter, also the seating and the placement of that clasp on the bracelet, which ultimately will ride on your wrist, is actually a huge factor in getting a really nice fit. So keep that in mind. And just look at this dial. I mean, it's cool, guys. You have, of course, this nice flat brushed finish. Everything is very straightforward in terms of the layout. You do have some really well finished buttons. Check that out. The lower buttons even do have a polished surround around them. And then these are all, of course, to set the timing functions, as well as using a stopwatch feature in terms of actuating that start and stop. So very cool, very clean. There's other channels. I mean, this module is nothing revolutionary. There's plenty of channels that really go into depth in terms of how to utilize and set your watch. For me, I just set it and forget it. I have so many watches. If I do want to use a function on a watch, it's typically going to be a chronograph function on an analog mechanical timepiece, or a diver's bezel, or a traveler's bezel, or GMT. So when it comes to using things for timing, I'm not really big into that. I would rather just probably use my phone to set a timer for something versus running a stopwatch at a digital aspect. But it is nice to have the option in case you need it. And man, this is just a good looking piece, guys. Let's breathe that in there. I mean, there's not a lot of, anything complex to this watch, but it's just the simple niceties, the beautiful form factor, and the design flow is just really impeccable, especially when you think about this price point and what this really is and within the market. So with that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this just looks absolutely immaculate. Of course, if I do get my wrist a bit too close to the lens, you're going to get some perspective distortion. It's going to look a lot larger in terms of its appearance versus how it actually lays. So what I'll do is I'll keep my wrist nice and low and just tighten up the frame here so you guys can still get a detailed look without, making the watch look overly large. So check that out. So although I do have a slightly larger wrist at 7.5 inches, as you can see, it's quite round. So it's not like I have this big, wide, flat wrist that's going to accommodate to every single wristwatch. I am also very cognizant in terms of, paying attention to proportions of the watch and that lug to lug. And you can see here, that 40 millimeter lug to lug keeps this nice and centered. Also, of course, the balance of the smaller dial opening for the digital display and then those buttons really nicely balanced. And this is just a very cool and clean piece. I'm sure some of you guys recognize that square watches can appear larger just because, especially when you have a semi-integrated bracelet style where everything flows with the case, these can wear a bit larger. Sometimes they can wear a bit smaller. It really depends on the particular model and, those particular proportions. So don't, be so hard set in numbers if you feel like this might be too small for you, because I will tell you that it wears quite wonderfully. Even that bubble back, as you can see, nicely melts away for the most part while it's sitting on your wrist. So although this is, a stainless steel watch and it is offering you a bit of extra heft versus, something like a resin cased model where it's just going to have kind of a chrome plating on it, here you can see that it just has a nice presence to it, and it does add a slight amount of heft that makes it feel a bit more premium. But thanks to that lightweight module and whatnot, it's nothing overpowering, overwhelming. It still feels quite thin, quite worry-free. And man, again, the design here is what really does it. The execution is also quite nice, but I don't want to overhype the execution also, because at the end of the day, this is this isn't an Oceanus watch. This isn't an Edifice watch. This isn't a G-Shock. So there's not a lot of extra technology that's put into this finishing, but it is a nice tighter tolerance, especially for a watch that's under $150, and that's retail. So I mean, I'm sure at some point you'll be able to, if not already, you'll be able to find these under retail. And the nice thing is, because it's Casio and these are so popular, you can actually find these at the mall. You can actually go over to Zoomies and pick up one of these in the metal and take a look, and you can actually compare it against a couple of other Casio vintage watches, which I think is really, really cool, and something you don't get to say about a lot of watches today. And I'm not talking about just micro brands, but I mean, it's even harder and harder to find, your favorite Citizen or Seiko models out at a retail capacity without going to a specific dealer. So it is nice that, hey, when you're just out doing some shopping with the family, you can actually, pop into a mall and you see a Zoomies and actually try on this piece, and while your kids are running around looking at other stuff. So with that said, let's actually take this off, set it up. Although there's not really loom, we'll do some low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, guys, no loom, but what I can do is an in the dark backlight press. So you get that, we'll do it a couple more times. Why not? Okay. All right. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is going to be that low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So we include a little bit of harsh lighting, which could expose any types of production defects. But all you're going to see here is just probably a little bit of extra fingerprint there near the buttons, a little extra finger oil from pushing the button before getting on camera. But you can see pretty nice finishing there. The light is gliding very nice over these nice flat brushed links. So a nice little light catcher. And of course, you're going to see that depending on the angle of the light, you're going to have issues with legibility, right? Depending. So you're going to have to press that button once in a while. But hey, the nice thing is you get something in the more direct lighting. you know that you're going to be good to go in terms of legibility. So very, very cool, guys. Just a very all around, just handsome piece. And you guys know, if you're fans of the channel, that I've reviewed quite a few of these kind of nicer looking and more premium Casio digital watches, and pretty much all of them have gone to my son, my middle son, Mason. And he loves these watches. This one, honestly, I'm digging it so much. I think I might keep this one to probably wear and then, you know, kind of Casio bro out with him once in a while when he's wearing his. So that's, I think, a little bit of a testament to how much more grown up this watch feels. And especially considering that, yeah, I do have a pretty large collection, and, you know, some of them are really nice pieces. And there's something that when I wear this watch, I just enjoy it, and it doesn't necessarily, you know, leave me longing to wear something else. So this is a really cool one, guys. Closing thoughts on the wrist. It wears similar to other pieces within the vintage line, but it does feel noticeably more premium. Nice and thin profile. Still feels relatively substantial and robust, which is a nice plus. And then in terms of model variants, it's also available in either a black or gold IP or ion plated finish. And then in terms of comparable models, there are a lot of other brands that are charging a lot more money to kind of tap into this brand of nostalgia that Casio is so wonderfully and authentically captured. And I think the nice thing about Casio is you're getting a more authentic and purified take on this aesthetic, because these are not just something where they're trying to recapture a look. It's a reissue, right? It ties back to something that is you know, intrinsic to the brand's own design language. So I really dig that. So guys, for me, bottom line, this is another Casio vintage model that perfectly just does retro digital, and it just does it really well, and it excels. But it does add a touch of premium build without adding too much of a premium price. So I think that's awesome. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.